Last week we completed the big ceremonies. The big ceremonies are they're the climax of the ango, of the practice period, which for us started in April, 3 months. So we're not quite at the end. There's an official closing date of the ango. It's July 15th. And on that day, I won't be here, but Jisho Siebert of Zen Fields in Iowa will be here, and she'll speak. And that, in that way, we'll kind of close that gate. But even though we aren't at the end, there's an understanding that having done what we've done, we're kind of moving toward the finish line. We're wrapping things up. I went looking for something that would speak to that. And I instantly found this koan from Dogen's collection. It's very short, like all the good ones. Dongshan told the assembly at the end of the summer training period, which is it's this time. When summer ends and autumn begins, go straight to a place where there is not 1 inch of grass for 10,000 miles. No one in the assembly could respond. Later, a monastic told Shishuang about it. And Shishuang said, "Why didn't you say there's grass all over the steps outside the gate?" It's so short. So at Dongshan's monastery, they're in exactly the moment that we're in. They're finishing this practice period. And the way that the practice periods are formulated, and it became, I think, even more formal once the practice entered China, was there's 3 months, and that's called ango. And at the end of ango, you enter what's called gei. Gei lasts another 3 months. And the structure of it is that during ango, you don't leave. No one enters the monastery, no one leaves the monastery. For any reason. You're cloistered. But during the 3 months of gei, you can move. So a lot of things happen. When gei opens up, there are monks who complete their training at that monastery and they go home. There are monks who leave the monastery to go to another monastery. There are monks who maybe travel a little bit, or they go back to their home temple for a while to help. And the schedule kind of loosens up. And there's more coming and going, not just of monks, but of the people locally. There's a sense of it being very open. And then 3 months later, we enter ango again, and everything closes. So there's this intensity of being very, very in it. And then there's this kind of exhale. And the walls of the temple become much more permeable. You can move in, you can move out. It doesn't feel like anything is being broken by that. In the Buddha's time, if we go back to India, the idea was not only that you could move, but that the ango only existed for the period of the ango, at which point everyone dispersed. There was no set place, there was no set monastery. And so when we entered into gei, which lasted 9 months, the idea was to travel far and wide and to share the Dharma in all directions, timing it so that whatever your path is, it brings you back here at the beginning of ango again. So Dongshan is meeting these monks at the end of the ango, and he's saying, at the end of this ango, when you leave this place, I want you to go directly to a place where there is not 1 inch of grass for 10,000 miles. Now, different people might understand this differently, but my understanding, my simple understanding, because Dogen speaks to this in other places, is that grass is the temple. Dogen said that we establish a monastery by planting a blade of grass. So when he says, go find that place where there is no grass, he's setting a challenge. He's saying, I want you to get as far from the temple as you possibly can. To go to another world. It brings to mind for me Kodo Sawaki saying that when he dies, he wants to go to hell. Because in hell, he might be of use. Not seeking someplace comfortable, not seeking someplace familiar, but going where you're needed. There's a complicated relationship in this tradition to temples. Because in one way, they're given tremendous weight. And you could all see that in these ceremonies. There's this sense that a temple needs to be recognized as a temple. And that once recognized as a temple, that there are things that you do to kind of activate the temple. There are also roles within the denomination that if you're not the abbot of a temple, you can't perform those roles. So there's this deep sense that we are tied to temples, and that establishing temples and training in temples, upholding and maintaining temples matters on one hand. And on the other hand, with almost no exceptions, a handful in a generation, there is an expectation in this tradition that people don't stay in the monastery their whole lives. That the temple is a place you go and it's a place you leave. And that each of us is supposed to go out into the world somehow. That we're supposed to find that distance, that we're supposed to find that way of serving that isn't cloistered and doesn't rely on that familiar thing, that doesn't rely on all the supports of the practice. Because there is nowhere where you are more supported in the practice than in a monastery, where there is no other goal than to sit in zazen and to chant the sutras and to wear the robes. There's no secondary thing. And what we're told is, you can't do that forever. That has a place, but it's establishing a kind of ground for something else. We have spent a lot of time in the last months, over the last year, 2 years really, on establishing this thing that is the temple. But now is when we start to remind ourselves that that has always been in service of leaving. I had this feeling when we were doing these ceremonies outside, because we took this temple, this tiny room, and we expanded it. We put a tent outside. And so instead of the temple being 12 feet deep, suddenly it was 50 feet deep. And there was a sense that I could walk out this door, but I wasn't leaving. I was still here. I could keep going and keep going and keep going. What this story is about is breaking through the idea that there's an inside and an outside. Dongshan says, when you leave this place, I want you to really leave. I want you to go to a place where there is no hint of temple-ness for 10,000 miles. Leave it completely. Can you do that? And no one knows what to say. Everyone is trying to think, is there even such a place? Do we know a place where not one blade of grass grows for 10,000 miles? And so they're just blank, thinking, what have we just been asked to do? And when this story goes back to Shishuang, he sees it so clearly. He can just laugh it off. He says, you should have mentioned to him that even one step outside the temple, there's grass on the steps. In essence, there is no such place. And we can leave. Everything, let me start over. There's a basic question, and there should be a basic question about what this is, about what a temple is. When I was younger, my idea was that it was a kind of sanctuary. It was a place that protected the Dharma, and by extension, it protected me. It kept everything else out. There was a version of me that I wanted to be, and my idea was that if I go into that building, I can just be that person, or I can try to be that person. And all the parts of the practice that felt awkward or where I felt self-conscious, bowing, and chanting, calling people by these weird names, things that might feel weird in my home or might feel weird on the street, in that temple where I would see the Buddha and I would smell the incense, it didn't feel weird. Well, this is what we do here. This feels good. And then I would step out into my other self. There was my practitioner self and my other self. And my other self just went about his business and looked forward to when he could come back. And it could be like that. But what I've come to see is it's not a sanctuary. It's something else. It's a place where we go and we are held accountable. It's not simply that I get to go there and be the way that I want to be. It's that I go there and there is a way that I am expected to hold myself in the world. There's an understanding that in this place, giving lip service to vow is not enough. That in this place, however I understand embodying the way, I have to do that 100%. I'm wearing the robe right now that many of you sewed. And it's a very particular sensation because in one way, I feel so held up by this and by all of you. I feel this support and it's almost overwhelming. And simultaneously, it's so heavy. Not literally heavy, but it feels like the weight of responsibility. That by putting on this, I am saying yes to something and to some place and to all of you. And I can't just take it off. Shishuang, in this very simple way, is saying it's always like that for all of us. We can leave this place and we should leave this place. But in the same way that when the baby Buddha, they say he walked and lotus flowers bloomed beneath his feet, wherever we go, that's where the temple is. We recognize it in that one blade of grass, and it is recognized through us because we feel that accountability. We feel how we hold ourselves in the world. We recognize that these vows matter and that however we work them out, we can't stop working them out. That there is no place where there is no grass for 10,000 miles where we can finally relax. And not do this work anymore. We walk in, and that's it. And then no matter where we go, we have not left. I felt this as I watched our guests driving and flying away. And I thought, they're not here, but they aren't gone. I see some of you on the screen today who are sometimes here, but you're also there. And some of you who have never been here, but you've always been here. I don't know if I'm making sense. But as this one moment in our community winds down, and as we celebrate that, because everyone worked so hard, I want us to hold this sense of there are things that can't be undone. There are paths that once we start to walk on them, there's no going back. Not because the universe says so, but because we know that's true. I know that's true. And I see it in the way that so many of you hold the world. And that encourages me. And that's where I'll stop.